What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We're going to break ground on our first major project of 2021, which is actually held over from the beginning of 2020. And, the customer decided that she wanted to put off construction and just see how things were going to go. So we're back at it now. A year later, this has been hanging out on the docket, basically. Here's the back of her house. We'll look at this in the following video or the previous video. I never know what's going to happen here. This is some real high production value looking at my computer screen with my phone. But these are, the site here, and she's got a tree on the property there. And, we started with coming out and turning the stairs, in the direction that you approach under a pergola, and some other kind of basic stuff. And then I started to think, well, we could go around the tree. It would give me a chance to use one of those super cool cast iron grates that are sort of, around trees in a more of a metropolitan setting. I think it'll look really cool here. And they are square, but then they are circular in terms of the grate detail. I may take the corners off and set the circle only in the hole, in a circular hole, to play nicer with this curved leading edge of the lower area of the deck. But, I show a square here. And so here's the drawings in real life. Once again, maybe a circle, not really certain on the final profile here. The grade kind of goes up on the way to the house. So being one step up from the grade all the way around and having like a jelly bean shape or a perfect circular arc shape is all going to be figured out kind of ad hoc in the field. We'll do as much as we need to do here, but making an exhaustive topographical map of the site and then, modeling the exact curve and then trying to copy all that in real life is sort of the type of thing that designers get a bad rap for, in the sense that, an architect or somebody is just milking a project when it could be handled in the field. Since I do both parts of I design and build, I leave myself wiggle room. Of course, the town needs plans, so I told them, this may change, but I'll do an as-built drawing, it's called, when we're finished. But these are the CAD views here with some people for scale. And the door we got secondhand. It's like a $6,500 pallet door that's 7 feet wide, and it's a monstrosity. But it actually has an arced top, so I think that'll mean we'll take an arc out of the pergola beams, maybe at least in the entryway section here that's higher up. Maybe reflect that in the front of the side pieces, and maybe even in this, the sides as you go along there, depending on how exactly we finish out the pergola. Pergola will be constructed, the rafters will be constructed in larch, just like the last one from a few years ago that we did, and everything else will be pressure treated lumber. We did look at maybe stairs in the center and flower planters and seats and stuff on either side, but as of now, we are going to do, this is the most accurate thing here, kind of, is stairs across the front. Although the posts will be set up tight, the stairs, the final step will start where the post lands, or the post may drop through the front of the first step. All kinds of different, things that may happen on site, once again, when the place itself informs the final details on a project usually, and things come to me later, and I like to be ready to embrace that, but I also want to be prepared to show a plan. So this is what we're going to build, and we've got the truck loaded out with the appropriate tools and equipment. We're going to start with the French doors. We were thinking it would be bad weather. Could have been outside today, but I need to coordinate renting the post hole driller and stuff, so I can't do that last minute. So we're going to start inside. So we'll come back and check out the site, the lumber delivery, and then we'll be watching the French door install to an extent, and at some point I'll pivot and move outside to start drilling. The door itself needs to be framed symmetrically by the posts that are right there, and so it really has, it's so important that we get the door and installed / decide exactly where it'll be. Then I can commit to hole drilling. I hate to commit to drilling holes and then come later to put a door in and have to move left or right, and so that reveal of the house, to either side of the first post is very noticeably different with regard to the door. Just if we're doing everything together as one whole project, nice to have that come in absolutely perfect. So here I am putting my foot in my mouth, and let's hope something doesn't happen to force that not to be the case when we get there. Here's our lumber order showing up. What a machine puts your lumber right where you want it. No fuss, no muss. Love all that fine tuning. All part and parcel. In, out, left, right, up, down. Turn on a dime. Outriggers. Quite a piece of engineering. Alright, while I wait for him to come back with the post, let's go out to the backyard. Take a look at the site. We're going right here, and we'll look at the drawings in the next video, but this will be a full patio here. Then we're going to step down and come through here. We're going to finish right around this tree, and we're going to do a pergola section over the higher part there. And between the windows, we're going to put a nice set of French doors with full lights here, so that we can fully appreciate this very nice backyard. Can't wait. Next couple of days, we'll lay out and drill our holes. But we're breaking ground today, and here are our precast concrete footings. This is a 4,500 psi concrete cookie, and so we'll just thump, 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 drop those right in the bottom of the holes, and set our posts right up. No making concrete on site, no water, no freezing cold hands, no filthy concrete boots. None of that for us. Okay, waiting for traffic. That's your Moffett delivery. Then they have roll-offs where they can just dump it and stuff too, but I just want to be nice and gentle here. Don't want to wreck the lawn any more than it's already going to kill the grass probably, but it'll come back. Alright, we're on site finally here to work today. It is a little after noon. Time we load up all the tools and finalize our building permit and everything. Here we are. I like to try and be billable 10 to 6 in the summertime weather, because of course there's plenty of the day left after 6 p.m. But getting up and getting out of the house and getting started with having everything you need just takes a couple of hours, even though I'm normally up by 7 anyway, if not 6:30. So, point is, this is that monstrosity, and it's a beauty. This is a Pella Architects Select, or Architects Reserve. Architects Reserve. It's a real humdinger, my grandpa would say. It's a fully composite construction. Aside from the interior side is an unfinished pine. And unfinished pine. It's a real beauty. Real dimensional grids on both sides give that, the best case scenario for a real divided pane look, which of course it's all one pane of glass. But they used to simply be individual pieces, and there was a rabbet or otherwise a groove and all of this, and it was all millwork, etc. So we don't want to, most people that I would work for, and myself included, want a real dimensional grid. Oh, I'm gonna clean every one of the, I don't care. I'm not installing a smooth glass door unless I really, really want to do your project. Because I'm a cherry picker and I like to work on vintage homes that and do beautiful work that, continues to contribute to the quality of the home overall. So that's important to me. It's a 6,300 and some, I forget where's the slip, MSRP, but somebody ordered this for a customer last year who had just wanted a quote, and then they called and said, hey, it's in, and they said, what's in? So then the distributor had to sit on this. It does have a small blemish here. It's the tiniest little bit of a scrape. I may get it off of there with like a Mr. Clean scrubber, a very high grit sandpaper is all that is. Or I have a little touch-up paint. Had to be front, top, dead center, right in my face. If anyone operating the door, couldn't have been down there or elsewhere. So I kind of got them on that as well. And I could tell they were in a hurry to get rid of it. We got it for $4,000 out the door with delivery. So it showed up yesterday. And just a heck of a quality item for a really good price. And everything came with, it's all Pella lock set, and it's a clear opening. It's an 84-inch by 84-inch rough opening. It's got a true curved top, so it just requires a 7 1/4 LVL header, 2 layers straight through, just catching the top of the curve. And everything is Pella hardware, Pella oil rubbed bronze handles, etc. So you can, I believe you can pick the primary slab. So in other words, which one stays more often and which one's more often used. They lock together, but to swing them both open, it's a clear, 6.5 foot opening. And it's just gorgeous. And it will be the feature of this whole project, basically. And we got, like I said, a great price on it. It'll be front and center and under the central higher area of the pergola. And to go along with the curved top, like we said previously, we're going to create details in the pergola that echo that kind of a thing. So our lumber's out front like you saw, and let's just check out what we brought for tools to kind of do us for most of this whole project. I probably need to grab something that I didn't bring here or there, but I've got the meat and the potatoes of what we need here. And when we step inside, we don't let any cats or dogs out, we don't interrupt her daughter doing schoolwork, but we move over in here, and this will be where the door is going. I believe that we're going to consume this window and, go over there with the rough opening for the door. Because of how tight it is to this wall, I'd actually like to see it move over a bit. So though we'll be inside the window opening that was here, I'd like a bit more white space in terms of drywall, and then trim, and then the door, and then trim again, and then some more white space, and then this window here. And so that's why I say I'll be in and out today to be sure that everything jives with door placement between the look of the door in the home and the look of the door outside with a relationship to all these windows. And then that's where we'll place our posts that go to either side of the door for the deck. And in the end, everything will look like we planned it and did our due diligence, which is important. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're at the studio today, kind of a dreary day, but I want to go over the idea that we do design/build, which would mean I'm an architectural designer as well as a general contractor or independent contractor, construction professional, and so I try to work soup to nuts with customers, and we talk about the ideas that they've got for normally creatively improving an entertainment space of the home. My education was in entertainment design for film and TV and theater, so you see some monsters and suits and stuff like that around the studio. And so I try to adhere to things that need drama and gravitas or splendor, grandeur, places where we entertain in our kitchen, on our deck, outside, and tree houses, outbuildings built to echo the architectural features of the old vintage house, or general remodel and renovation for older homes, to do so in a way that's like in keeping with the way that they were always, the way that the people were thinking at the time when those homes were built, and not just putting a big cancerous contemporary tumor, or for lack of a better way of putting it, into a space that doesn't make any sense to do that. So these are the photographs of the site for this new deck with pergola and French door. These are actually from early 2012. I mean, this is really high production, by the way, value. March 30th, 2020. So yeah, over a year ago. So we were talking about doing this and breaking ground this time of year last year, but of course, COVID and whatnot, we didn't get back to rushing through and building on site, but I was able to take some, do some photography, and then we did some, this is where the process kind of begins, is with simple hand sketches. I can kind of look at, no, these aren't traced from photos. I work here on the desk, looking at the the photography. This is sort of, as you can tell, sketched based on this photograph, but it's not exhaustively perfect. There's no important reason to trace. So, our first kind of sketch and discussion was a single surface with a couple of stairs, and we enter from the gate here, and you may have seen that in the first video so far, as we come around the corner. Tree had nothing to do with it initially, but we were, a joist bay, to the carrying beam here, and then a second joist bay here. So a pretty large deck initially, that we were discussing, and, overall from above, obviously, how would the pergola rafters work out, and a general number of posts. And this is all, as you can see in a few minutes, how much the design changed. People always like to know, how much we're talking, and it's just so difficult because, a deck is a deck, but they're not remotely that similar when it comes to lumber order and stuff. Here we set back the first, the first course of posts here, or the first course is at the back. So the second course of posts coming through the center of the deck with a carrying beam underneath, and then a second course, or a third course of posts out at the leading edge with a beam, but no posts out here. So, really short pergola tucked back in there. And, we started with this curve and incorporated the tree, and I know where I can get some of these cast iron grates to finish around it. And so a conversation continued with a full width stair there. Later with the CAD model, we had pivoted to, these are the same, and again, these are relatively costly for what they are. I mean, we have to have a conversation about what exactly somebody wants to do. I, of course, am a design professional and enjoy developing designs, but, costs and stuff add up. So, if somebody's going to spend quite a lot of money, and I try to move into construction as soon as we can here. The CAD model we can't see. So, we had things like turned into, this is more of a fundamental revision to the design. I went through and made an actual 3D model. We moved away from stairs the full width and had benches with planters behind. We've moved the center section up and incorporated a French door, which doesn't exist in the house yet, but that center section is sort of, a cathedral entryway here. And implies traffic under the higher areas and more of a retreat to the either side, which helps, when you're entertaining or people spending time there, the way that your furniture informs the way that you lay out your furniture. But with some site measuring and, a variety of conversations via email, we arrived at this being very attractive, and we felt, like we'd moved further. Again, this last post isn't this post here, because as you can see, to get to this elevation, we've got to stay away from the eaves here and the gutter that's there and the downspout and stuff. But when you get into CAD, you start using real scale, unlike this sketch. I do what I can here to sort of imply be informed with what I've got for a real scale, but I may show one too many posts. I may show openings and stuff more narrow or not as wide, because I have no real scale there. So if I model it in the computer based on a site measure, we start to find out that indeed this is a weird sized opening. It does merit some guard and another post, but that's where we get into like what actually has to happen here. And so these are other views of that. But we've since gotten away from those specifics, and we're on to, here's our sort of final sketch again. So I didn't make these changes to the model, because we'd worked along on the model to a point where I had what I needed for framing and a lumber order, but the details of the locations of things has changed. I don't know what's going on with color here. Getting too close. Ultimately, the posts clear through the face of the first step, which is a nicer look, more of a lace instead of a butt and pass situation here. So the front posts, and they also divide that first step instead of it being one long thing, which of course it is. It just adds a little punctuation across the front, which I think is a nice detail. We went with that giant 84-inch by 84-inch curved top Architects Reserve. I keep forgetting or having a hard time with that. Full light French door. Because of the arc top, I'm going to start doing things like, I'm planning on scalloping these pergola beams to sort of go along with that. We may do the ones that lead into that area. It's still higher in the center and a little lower to either side. And again, does that mean I need a 16-foot 6x6? Because I've got to be 4 feet in the ground here. And then I've got to be, 3 or 4 to the surface of the deck. And then I'd like to have an 8-foot ceiling. Now is that beneath the bottom edge of the pergola beam or on the right, or is it beneath the bottom edge of the pergola beam on the left that we get 8 feet? And then obviously we go higher than that. But this all becomes, the way in which we decide whether to order 6x6s that are 16 feet long or whether we need 20s, which I ended up with 20s. We're going to have knees in here most likely to protect from racking. And so what comes off the top of the 20s, easily becomes a knee. And how exactly are we going to frame here? I think we're going to come out straight to a post that can carry a beam along that back side of the grate. Now, of course, that's straight, and here the grate has changed to a circle. I think I'm going to try and cut off the corners at the first large circle that's cast into the, coaxial kind of grill layout that's in there. Take the corners clean off, but of course, and the reason I'm comfortable with that is because I will also be having to curve this rim joist or something here around the front, and curve something to apply it as fascia. as like an appearance board. But if we're doing all of that, we're going to be able to curve something here to create a pocket for the circular edge of this to sit it down into and basically be flush with our 5/4 deck board. I may not have chosen to make that sort of level of complication if I already wasn't dealing with curves here, but I think the only reason, or the only, I would be remiss if I threw a big curve sort of around this tree and then threw a square grill in there without trying to make it a circular grill. And once again, it's a bit more customization, and in the end, it's a bit more finely finished. And with, you know, this is, for lack of a better word, we use that. We're down to this. So let's head over to the site finally. Here we are now back on site and down to what I would call the sheathing. These days we use OSB or zip system or a composite, and then we put a vapor barrier on it like Tyvek from DuPont. But like we talked last time when we were here, I don't know what I was thinking, that's an outside corner for a repair. I thought it was a window. It's obviously a door that was in here. This I think is original. I think it was straight clapboards onto framing, you know, which is to say, I don't know if I can get this to expose, but yeah. So everybody, you know, is down and out, waterfalled out, but clapboard. Nowadays, if you do clapboards on the house, you put it on the sheathing. Back in the day, it would be right on the framing, and really insulating didn't even occur. But as well as, you know, not only that, every one of these is sort of a lane of ingress to insects and stuff as soon as they can, you know, go underneath. I hope that that's exposing. My screen doesn't show it, but they can go underneath there, and they're in the wall, you know, now. So that was a problem. That was what was here. Tongue and groove, I believe, came later. Just as a factor of this being continuous across the top and this being what looks like a filled window hole. It's on the same elevation as the rest of the windows and doors. Anyway, this is tongue and groove. This is a little bit more contemporary, which I say tongue-in-cheek because, of course, it's still really old. But on top of all of this, there are cedar shakes, you know, out here. And so I think this was a flip, this house. The nature, you know, because I saw drywall and I got a sense of the window jamb. I don't know how I overlooked the fact that that was a vinyl insert, but basically I expected a 2x4 wall in here. We ended up, like we're saying, 3 inches, so I've already ripped all my 2x4s for framing here down to 3 inches. But it would have been plaster and lath, right? So the face of these still has the telltale white stripes where the plaster touches down on this framing, and then each one of these spaces is where the lath was. So those are gone now. Those I think are hardwood. I mean, that looks like, you know, oak. And this piece here would weigh nothing nowadays, but it still has a good, 3 or 4 pounds anyway. Half a gallon of milk there. So where are we at? I've got a curved top door. So here I marked 72 inches, and here I marked 84 because they call for an 84-inch rough opening, but that's because you're going to put a door in that does that, right? And so I don't want to cut this all out of my nice shake and stuff like that out there just to come back and do a repair with that. So I marked, and I found out, I went out and checked the door, even though I read the cut sheet, it also said so. 72 is where the arc begins. So I think to start with today, we're going to cut this out. Does that make sense? We're going to clear this out here. We'll leave the rest for another day when we can translate the arc and we're sure of, you know, what's happening there. But she was looking forward to coming home and seeing what looks like, you know, and feels like the sunlight coming in where she'll have it in this new door opening, and it's time for that anyway. We're also going to do repair here, or an improvement. Frankly, like again, this was a flip. This has got a sill beam with pockets in it here because those 3x4s that were like studs in the wall had a butt and pass kind of end on them, and the floor joists are going to be hung into this beam too. I'll show you in a cross section. Maybe I'll do another video. But as you can see here, we're having, you know, we've got a real, here's the top of the beam here, and then right off in here, this is all rotten out. And because it's under the window, you know, it's local to the window opening, basically where it starts here, it's because this was leaking. And, you know, this is also the west where we get a lot of our weather here. So driving rain and stuff like that was just coming in and laying in the groove where the sash lands on the outside, and potentially coming through the sill itself after it gets to rotting and stuff like that. And so it was running down in the wall and collecting up here and rotting that. I don't see a lot of water damage. You know, I see the black staining here. So if it's traveling downward, it normally comes through, gets wet, and then dries out again after the rain goes. But it stands and rots at the bottom of its travel there. So that was what was going on, even though this was all getting wet. Where it stands and stays wet the longest is where you get the greatest amount of water damage. So I guess today we're going to just take that little portion out to the outside, and that way we can stand on the ground out there and we can have a look. Oh, there's my hammer. We can have a look at what it's going to take to fill in this area in here, so that we're on a plane here and can set our new door on that. And we'll look at another video. I'll do it with the whiteboard so I can show you how contemporary homes are built and the way that this home was built here at the the day and age when it was constructed, and why we haven't got a floor inside the wall. You know, they certainly weren't thinking 100 or 150 years after they built it, people would be coming to Lowe's and Home Depot on the weekend and making improvements to their home and adding doors and stuff like that. Otherwise, you know, for many other reasons as well, we'd have, you know, a complete subfloor inside the wall. But that wasn't the type of thinking that they were doing at the time, and there's some other reasons why we don't build like this anymore either. But I don't even really think I need a header, because just like our sill beam, I've got a second story beam here, and you know, that's strung between posts that are in here at the corner of the house, and probably halfway to the other side of the house there's a post standing in here, and that'll be like a 9x9 or at least an 8x8, if not a 10x10 square hardwood beam that went in green, you know, having just been cut down and hewn square, and then it dried in there. And so it's basically like cast iron now. It weighs a metric shit ton, and it is extremely hard, and there's no reason to worry about the span that it's doing here dipping or anything. But the town wants a header, so we'll put in a header. All right, come on back and see us when we got a big gaping hole in the wall, and or tomorrow we are pivoting to drilling all of our post locations, because we're pretty certain about our door spot, you know, our door spot now. Oh, and we got to work around our radon pump, which should be okay, but we will end up coping the floor of the deck around it. It's getting to be a nice few days, so we're working outside tomorrow. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you. Welcome back. We were able to reach behind these 3x4 hardwood posts that were in here with our thin, flexible Sawzall blade. And where is that? You know, for slicing up framing, it'll cut nails. And that was nice, because this whole thing, you know, is just clapboards that were original, with a layer of cedar shake on top of those. And over here where this doorway was filled with tongue and groove, you know, the whole thing is just, you know, if we'd have been trying to pry here, you're actually, when you're prying behind those timbers, you're just pushing the siding and the sheathing products off of them well, as they stay in place. So being able to reach behind there and slice down behind everything, and then if they didn't want to come straight out, I just cut it in half, tipped the top out and pulled it down, and same for the bottom. But they were, you know, pocketed into this beam across the top and into the sill beam across the bottom. So they were just set in there and not pinned with nails, so they came right out really nice. And they're going to be oak or hardwood of some kind. This is 2 or 3 pounds here. It would weigh nothing now if it was softwood and was this old and dry. But interesting, kind of all of this was probably, this is sawn, I believe. It's not hewn. So sawn, and but the beam is hewn. So those are our classic hew marks on it there. But so right about that time where you would do that way, but you know, maybe got some other timbers sawn, everything was green or hadn't dried, and you build the whole house and it would dry and shrink up over time. And now those are like iron and weigh a lot. So glad I didn't have to dig nails out of any of those and just cut the nails off that were in here. But we're down to, you know, this sill beam once again, the way that this is constructed with a sill beam rather than a sill plate, and then a rim joist and floor joists over into the space, then a subfloor over the whole first floor surface, and then you start with your first floor walls built upon the subfloor. That's how we do it now. These days you would build your wall up and then you would send, you know, a floor out in here, and at least you would finish it out in here after the wall was standing in place. So that means you could only go as far as the face of your framing with the finished floor or the subfloor boards, and when you take everything away, now we have kind of a 4 or 5 inch, you know, hole down in there. So we need a surface there to accommodate the door installation. I'll end up with, you know, a 2x4 or a 2x6 ripped
standing on its edge along on our side, along on the other side, and ripped in such a way that the top of them comes in under the surface of the floor, so that I can add a piece of 3/4 inch subfloor material and be round about the level of the subfloor here. I'm going to ignore the finished hardwood surface because that would be additional to what I had for a surface here in a contemporary sense. So if I do it that way, I should end up with just what I need to have the door surface or the threshold meet up with the finished floor inside the house. I'll look at that in cross-section on a whiteboard in another video. But for right now, all you need to know is that I just zipped along behind these, cut them in half, picked them up, took them out of here, and then our opening is 84 by 84, just to catch the top of the arched door. I went out and checked the door, and I see that this arc starts at 72, so I made a mark at 72. There's the 84 there, and that'll be what we take out today. We'll leave ourselves this material because I don't want to have to build it back outside. I don't want to have to put cedar shake back together out there if I don't have to. I have to do it over here anyway because we're missing the window opening. And so I'm just trying to be wise. If it comes to it, I can take it away, but like everything, I'll do less, until I have to do more, just as a best practice. But when we're all done, again, this will be better in this area of the home than it ever was before. So let's get that cut open, and tomorrow is hole drilling day finally. And I got Don's help, I think, all day. We're going to put as many of the 20-foot pressure treated posts up as we can and stilt and stake them, plumb and on layout, which takes some time on top of our footings, and maybe even throw some dirt back in the holes. We're using the MT85, which is coming with the bucket and the auger, and boy, would it be sweet to put all of our posts up, use the bucket on it to backfill, and then let the rain come down Wednesday, day after tomorrow, and know that it's just getting packed up tight for us. And then I can come back to this. I'll leave it covered with plastic, but then we'll come back and try to put the door in that day or then the next few days. But it's starting to be kind of nice weather out, so we're going to try and get through this as quickly as we can so we can get out in the sun building decks. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you. This is a sill beam from a house that's over 100 years old. It's hardwood. It went in when it was green and it dried after the home was constructed. But somebody's been packing insulation in here. Fiberglass is full of house centipedes living in here, just munching on that. And all this fiberglass does, there he is hold moisture in here. And it just starts to, just fall apart. And then you get going and it gets worse and worse. And then all of a sudden we've got this sort of a thing underneath the window that used to be here. All of this is all wrong, but don't worry, we'll fix it. Stay tuned. Quite the hole there. We were able to get rid of the sheathing as we talked about before and get outside and kind of pull everything down in a way and have, this is why I wanted to do it this way, is because I can have a great, clear look at what we've got for a sill beam here, and kind of, it's just, under other circumstances, almost every other time here, when there was a problem, nobody went this far to tear everything off and see what they were looking, what they were working with. We had all this water damage here, which, like I say, this stuff just breaks off. By hand, it's just pumice, it's just foam wood. The window was here. Long ago, it was leaking water. And so that water was, laying down here like we talked about and rotting this out all the way over into there. This is the worst of it. Right over here, it's, I wanted to say structurally sound. It's a lot better than over there. It's not as bad as it could be. Anyway, I don't know what else somebody was doing here. All of these screws that are in at an angle, and there's here, here's one here, they went in like that. And this is some kind of, I don't even know. This is some kind of like baseboard or something. It's untreated. It's got a cove shape. See that circle shape in there? So it's like finished lumber. Somebody stuck it underneath here and then caulked the bottom edge of the clapboard and caulked it to the foundation. So it's not a ship. Homes aren't boats. We don't need to be waterproof from below. In fact, everything is left. It's why all of your clapboards are like they are here. We don't caulk underneath there. I was trying to lift that off, but the paint has kind of finished it, but we get holes like that here and there, all along. You know what I mean? This is what you've got, because water rains down and rains against this, and it rolls and drips and rolls and drips and drips and drips and drips and drips and drips all the way down. But some of it, if it drips along the edge here, and then with surface tension gets stuck on that, it can roll along, and then by capillary action, that's why this caulk just pulled off of there. I mean, that's nothing. It's meaningless. So now, and that's why I can dig all of that apart with my finger, because it rolls around in there and gets sucked in with capillary action, and it's back inside the house again, and it's moist in the dark, and you know, the microbes are growing now because they've got organic material and moisture, which is the two things that, you know, and heat, basically, and they're eating that wood. They're eating that cellulose. And your house rots on you. I don't know, because this goes all the way out that way and all the way out that way. And it was done because, you know, the last clapboard is basically at the plane of the bottom of the beam. I mean, I'm happy with that. I think I will just rip this all right down. It should just be exposed. Water should and moisture should be able to come out of it downward. It's not as though the ground is right here and the humidity of the soil is radiating up and drilling its way, you know, in there. It's not as though it's right here and the water that splashes down from rainwater is splashing up underneath here and making it wet. That would be another case to, you know, be concerned. Trying to think. The level of our deck is going to be at the level of the floor, basically, or maybe like an inch down or so. I like to be about an inch below the inside of the home. So it's basically smooth. You don't trip through there, but, you know, so you don't want a piece of a step. So you either go with a full step or basically no step or perfect. Perfectly smooth and flush. Even though we're away from the home by an inch or two, you know, with snow that builds up here and stuff and melts along, we don't want anything running along and running against the glass of the doors and down the face of the doors. It's just the best practice to be away from it a little bit. Anyway, long story short, that means that the deck surface is going to be in here as well. And though we get rain on that, it's a hard call, because I am going to not keep it in the area that I'm working. I'm inclined to stick a 2x10 treated right to the outside here, full height, and, well, you know, and basically take the height up and down and level it to where to be on top of that 2x10 with a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, to come over here at 90 degrees and level with the plywood brings me right in to, jeez, who knows. I'm gonna call this 3/8 laminate fake hardwood floor finished. I'm going to call the surface of this like 9/16 plywood that's in here the surface of what should be subfloor. You know, I'm going to call that the subfloor. So we're going to come in so that the 3/4 inch piece that we install is level there. Anyway, and that'll bring us up, and, you know, I can slide him up and down the face of this beam and just shoot him on there whenever he's where I want him to be, take the plywood over there. But then I will need a special kind of coped rip on the far side of it to support the other side of it. But doing all of that out here, like I was saying, will be easier than working from the inside only. I had imagined under other circumstances, if this place was conventionally framed, I would have done everything I needed to behind the plywood, the whole rough opening and everything all done up behind the plywood, and then the day that came to install the door, we reached through with the Sawzall and cut out the plywood from the opening, tip it out on the ground, and our opening is basically ready to be flashing taped and have the door go in. But given the ancient construction here and the, you know, recon that we're doing and the improvements that we're making, I wanted to get right at this and work at it from outside. And like I was saying, I will be cutting this out to the extent of the rough opening, but that just leaves the raw end of it to the right and to the left, and I'm not sure that I'd be happy with the raw end of it being on there at all. It's just another way to draw moisture in off of the end of what I built. I think I'm ripping it all down. I'm pretty sure I'm ripping it all down. Once you cover it with the deck, you'll get more humidity under there again, but we're going to leave our whole end of it open, and a lot of this end of it open, even though the house is right there. It'll be 4 or 5 inches, you know, away. And so what air needs to be able to circulate in here? We'll probably throw a bunch of pea gravel down to kill everything that's growing here, but you need to have air circulation to manage and equalize humidity levels anyway. So, and I think in the end that just means I'm ripping that little strip of bullshit off of there that somebody went to all the work laying on their back to install it when they parged this or, you know, repaired this. Again, think this was a flip house. Stuff like that is flip house type shit. But again, this whole area will be better than it was when we found it, when we're done here. That's kind of what we do. Alright, thanks for watching. We'll see you. It's a good thing these penetrations in the siding have been well sealed.
Everybody hates hole day. I don't know what it is. So satisfying to do a nice job of putting in your posts so that they're really nice and accurate and plumb. But getting it done, it's just a lot of hard work. Even though we use that MT85, which went along real nice with a 18-inch auger on it. And we didn't really find any roots, just a couple that were, not too big of a deal. However, it did break us into 2 days. Toward the end of the first day, I had to get going to actually see the premiere. We did a theater premiere, red carpet event for that musical production that we recorded, the previous project this year. So I had to run right out of here and do that. And we threw a track off the MT85 twice. The first time we put it back on, you may have saw me wrenching it back on Instagram, and then the second time it popped off, we called the rental place and they said, yeah, it sounds like it's time for a new belt, or a new track. So they came out and put one on for us the second day, and we resumed drilling and put these in place. I like to use, these days with lumber prices, this is all sacrificial lumber, but I use plenty of braces to get all of our diagonals and stuff in place, because we're counting on the rain to come. That's why the plastic is here. We may be rained out for the first couple of days next week, but that will settle our recently filled holes down. You may not be able to see, we may have been level or even lumped up a little bit, and we'll come back after the rain and it'll be further sunken in than that, maybe a foot, and then we can throw some more dirt on top. And then we'll be sure that we really got a nice solid hold of these 20-footers. We did make a mistake and throw a 20 at the back before I realized that 16s were to be at the back, 20s across the front, just because our land comes down. And so if all of our holes are 4 feet deep and we wanted to be level from the back at a certain elevation, if we put a 16 there and a 16 down here, we may miss the top of that 16. Nothing worse than wishing you could be higher and not having, once you've gotten all around and built out the bottom, coming to do a pergola and wishing you could go up a bit more just for an aesthetic reason or a logistical reason and not having what you need. So we went with full 20s across the front. They're another 10% or 15% more expensive than a 16, but the tops that come out will be used as knees if we need them, or ultimately for cribbing, for lifting and other projects at the shop. So it's just a best practice not to wish you had another foot or two or even 2 inches of post. I did take 3 guys. We lay them down with the hole and one of these braces laying down next to it, trailing from about the middle, and then as we take the post up, the brace trails behind you, but you can always kind of stop on him, and then he goes up a little more and you can stop on him, and then you get right up there plumb, and then we ultimately picked him up and turned around so the brace fell into basically the footprint of the job site. There's no problem having braces out here probably, but as a best practice I try not to take the whole even more area than we need if I'm going to not be here for a few days. I mean, today's Saturday. We had one nice day, so I worked on a Saturday, which I normally don't do. But it will be Sunday and at least Monday, Tuesday, given the weather forecast, before we're back. And it's just the less of an impact you can make. That's something that I try to do in my business, to be just a kind of a cut above and not just take over everywhere and make a big mess. So we turned everybody to the inn, and that keeps people out too of sort of the danger zone or whatever. For the most part, we won't have people crawling around in here. Even though with little kids, sometimes the job site is like a jungle gym for them. So anyway, long story short, hole stands open because we've got to have enough weather to work on that threshold area and do our rough opening on a nice day, because this isn't a conventionally framed house. So unfortunately we can't build our whole rough opening inside and then cut our way out and put the door in. And I just wanted to get these in before the rain. So like I say, we came out on a weekend, but they're looking nice. Love to look down the face of them all. I'm not sure if it translates on the phone, but everybody comes in real nice and level. All of our measurements are based on this concrete block face here because that stone foundation wanders. But yeah, you'll look right down the front of the house, and this will be cool as well because ultimately the posts stick out beyond the face of this a little bit. And so if our front step, like we talked about at the design stage, if our front step face is here, the level of the deck, then our face of our step, then our second step, and this is encapsulated there, the amount that this jumps out, it jumps out kind of that amount or something like that from the whole face of this house. And so it seems really intentional that they are just prominent, and it would have looked just as nice to sneak them back there as they do up front, but it's just another little detail that I think is going to end up looking really chic. And then of course we've got It's going to be a monster, this thing. Enough for all kinds of cool stuff to happen. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you. Look at this specimen. What a beauty. 2x12, pressure treated for ground contact, no knots. That's a serious board, brother. All right, we're back. It took us a few days to get some weather that was going to cooperate, but we're here. And we're just gonna hold this plastic up just as high as it needs to go and not undo any more than that, because I'm sure it'll need to come right back down again. The issue that we're running into here is that whether you have a sill beam or a sill plate, the edge of it, you know, a sill plate being a piece of treated lumber that lies in here like this on top of the foundation, and the sill beam does the same thing, but the outside edge of it should be flush and plumb, but flush to the foundation wall. And you can see here, I don't know how easily or not, but this beam is twisted back in here. I mean, the foundation wall comes up here to this point, and then our beam turns and goes out to the left on us. And all of this business, I mean, whether it's a sill beam or a plate, the sheathing of the house should be right on the surface of it, and the siding product is on top of that, whether there's a tar paper or moisture barrier or whatever, depending on where you live, whatever. None of this stuff in here or this bottom thing should be here at all. And so I've got to get out here again to the back of this sheathing with a representational and pseudo-functional rim joist here. And, you know, so how am I going to, essentially, what I know is, with my tape measure, and, you know, tell me if this is interesting to anybody or not. Sometimes I skip this stuff, sometimes I don't, but I'm going to get a sense of what the measurement is from the bottom edge here to the back of where I want to be, and where, you know, what it is here. And I could do that math just to be talking, you know, just to discuss how far out of plumb we are. But also I can tell at the tightest spot here, you know, I've only got an inch or a hair more than an inch, and really I need an inch and a half. So if I were to stick a 2x10 or a 2x12 to the face of this, not only would it be sticking out at an angle, I'd be sticking out proud of where I want to be, by how much. So I think the first thing to do here is to put a perfectly plumb face on the edge of this beam, and make that start essentially at the surface of the foundation here. And so to do that, what I've got here is a carpenter square on the surface of the floor, which we're going to, for sake of argument, call level. Really, it's not really about level, it's about planing. So that's a known plane. We're on that known plane, and we're going to move in on the known plane until we crash into the top corner. Now look at how far behind. I don't know if I can illustrate this with the phone camera. You know, but there's a lot of, this is maybe the way to do it. Here, there you go. So you can see almost the shadows helping. So we've slid on that plane until we've encountered the leading corner of this, and I can get a measurement here. I can do this anywhere. I can go anywhere up and down here to establish basically, you know, whatever that measurement is in that location needs to come up here onto the beam. And, you know, I may go far enough away to where I think it may have changed a little bit, because of course this twist isn't uniform. It is changing in one way or another. So over this width, I might get 3 or 4 locations where I stop and I measure and I translate that measurement up here. So I have 3 or 4 points along the top, and they ought to work out to some sort of close to straight line, or essentially I'll connect the dots. And then, given the angle here, roughly I'll set my skill saw to that angle, my circular saw, excuse me, to that angle, and I'll cut that line with the appropriate angle that looks like, yeah, that's the right one. That'll, you know, given the math and the way that it looks, will cut down in here 2 inches or so plumb. And then I'll reach down in there with the Sawzall, and I'll finish from the bottom of the circular saw cut and out what I'll be looking for, the blade coming out that leading bottom edge of the Sawzall. And that'll do a good enough job to probably need a flap disc or a sanding disc on the grinder to hog off a little bit of a step or whatever inconsistency here to dress it up a little bit. And then I can stick dimensional lumber on there, 1.5 inches. And once I've got a fresh 1.5 inches plumb and level, or at least relative to the floor's level here on there, then I can look at what I've got to have left to get right out from that to the back of this, and we're working as though that's plumb, and I can add that much more. If it ends up being a 5/4 board, if it ends up being you know, a rip of plywood or something treated, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I may decide that whatever it is, I want to sandwich it onto the beam first and then pack on the 1.5" 2x12, because that 1.5" 2x12 once again is what you would have for a rim joist on a new build home. So I like the idea of him being on the outside in essentially the position he would be in if the rest of the residence was constructed that way. And so that's the plan, and we'll come back and look at how far we were able to go. And obviously this presents a pretty significant problem, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, but stay tuned. We'll see you. That's what we call a major problem. 1.5 out over 7 feet for a big French door install. We'll figure it out, but it's not ideal. Welcome back, my sweet summer children. We left this last night after we screwed it down with some, we did use, and by we I mean me, some polyurethane construction adhesive. Love that PL Max in a plastic tube, and I don't think there's one here. Here it is, another urethane product, but it's a all plastic kind of a gunmetal tube. There's other PL construction adhesive, which is also great, but this is the very best of the best. This is what I glued those ends of those polyethylene bottles into those hole saw holes to make those corbel rosettes for the set, and I can't believe how great that sticks to plastic and wood. Anyway, bing, bang, boom. Fairly certain that this will be fine. Fairly certain I won't have to make it any thinner. Fairly certain I've jinxed myself at this point, saying it that many times. I've got a cool, like, modern art thing happening here. This is a satisfying part. What I did was note on here, I got an X inside of some lines where I already had filled the cavity up tightly and then like sliced it off before I applied this. So I knew where I had empty spaces here, and I sort of put a 1/2 inch hole in the middle and one toward each end and filled in either direction until it was rising out to basically create, it's all very basic. What I've created here is a composite polymer treated sort of area, and it's very contemporary. It will be ideal to put that door on here. I also snapped my line so it's copacetic with the bottom edge there, and took that rip off. There he is there. But I'm feeling good about this, and generally speaking, this is the best area of this side of the house overall. And so all we got to do now, we're at the surface here, and I really couldn't drum up what was going on here when I was sitting at the desk drawing, but I ended up out here. It was just easier to add 1.5 inches starting at the face of the foundation, which is where I created the plumb surface of the beam. Had I tried to make a plumb surface on that beam any further back into the structure, I would have been smashing into the top of the foundation wall with my Sawzall to complete that cut, and then I may have been able to set this 1.5 inches back in there so this was flush here. So not only would I have smashed and banged all the way across here with the Sawzall, which otherwise went smoothly without having that issue, I'd have had to have added a surface to this, and that's normally OSB again, but it would be out here, and even if I had covered the top of it with this OSB, it's not treated, and it's another, full 4x8 sheet just to stick this much on here, which is kind of wasteful as far as customers' material cost is concerned. And this will be just fine. It'll carry everything out here being solid treated wood, and we're just better off. In a real home build, you'd have the sheathing of the house across here, but we will be, coplanar here with these sheathing boards that were in just an area. I know I said these weren't in here, but they were here where there had been a door. Everywhere else is a clapboard first and then a cedar shake on top, which is over here. Yeah. So here's that's a contemporary stud that somebody added for this renovation, but the rest of the stud, timbers in here have just got clapboard on them, and then somebody did shake, and I don't know how you nail shake to clapboard without, by hammering, or you just have the clapboard smashed all to pieces and everything would be bouncing. So the shake was nailed on with a gun, which makes me think the cedar shake happened in the 80s here, late 70s, 80s at the latest, as far back in time. It could have been newer. They've been painted a couple times here, probably with this addition here, the concrete block versus the stone. But unfortunately, there's only clap on here for sheathing. So we'll be looking at how to sheathe our framing over here to run in behind and be able to link up and continue the shake there, and how to sheathe over here with something more like 7/8 or whatever this is. It's a bit greater than 3/4. We may fudge it a little, and then, you know, to run in our shake on top of that and make repairs. We kept our pieces that came out here, so we have the yellow shake already. Yeah, probably just need a little painter's caulking, and we'll make like a quart to match that and just paint around to do the areas to either side of the arch and stuff top. So anyway, these are going to all be 3 rather than 3.5. This gap in here. So we ripped all of our nice straight Doug fir 2x4s. I use Doug fir sticks for renovating purposes when I need a handful. If I'm going to build a new build, you know, it's a serious cost differential, but worth it for the half dozen we're going to use here. Made them all 3 inches, and so we'll put a little piece of sole plate in, and then we'll put a pair. Well, we'll put our kings. I gotta worry about how to work at that header. I'll make the header. I might stick the kings to the header ends and try to send that up in here somehow and add the jacks. It's going to be a bit of surgery here because I don't want to clear everything out of the way to just be able to set it in place, because it's just so much more finishing back to it. So we're going to try and build it in place and save ourselves the effort. And then it'll be a matter of getting our hooks in Don and his son Don, the Dons, to put the door in place. But can't wait for that. It'll be this week, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching. We'll see you. What are you doing, little Roo? How dare you? How dare you place more holes on our job site? Don't you do this. Welcome back, y'all. Looking better and better, if I may say so myself. We have got essentially a finished rough opening, and more importantly than outside, the inside has got a king, a pair of jacks, a header, and that's, again, because this is a beam or a timber frame construction, that's the beam right there. It's as big as the one down here. I did ask specifically, do I need a header in this opening? There's a giant beam up there, and they said yeah, so whatever. You know, she wanted to see 2x10, she said, so I bought a pair of 2x10s, and then to get our elevation and get underneath the beam, it was a rip from 6 inches to 6 5/8. So it could have been 2x8s that we bought, but try to play nice with the town. Whatever. What else? It's framed completely. We've married, sorry about the sun, we married the header together because it's about 6. Again, I used 3 fasteners on 16-inch centers all the way along. They're 3 1/4, and we don't even have a 1/2 inch in here. So they stuck right out, you know, 1/4 inch or more on the face of it. I had to bend them over. Then we needed 3/4 inch. You can see the transition here from the boards that were here to that is, you know, close enough. Oh, and these are boards here, and these are clap again. This must have been the top of the window or doorway that was here that they filled with these. And then we're back to what's actually underneath all this shake, which is clapboard. So that corner is going to be, and this is like, you know, tough to prepare for such an expensive door and get right and flash it up with, you know, get it with house wrap and get it with flashing tape. We're going to use Lowe's brand, what do they call this, Seal Tight for our pan across the bottom, and then we got a 4-inch for the 2 sides and the top, just to stick the edges of the the Tyvek down. And it's going to be what we call waterfall or whatever, so we'll apply these like shingles. So we'll start on the bottom, we'll get a strip of Tyvek across the bottom, it's 3 foot or whatever, we'll go across the bottom, then we'll go up both sides so that those are on top of, underneath the bottom, you know, underneath, they're on top of it, they run over the piece that goes along below, and then the last piece will go across the top, and everything gets taken into the opening, 1 2 3 4, and then the pan goes in, which is to say the wide flashing tape goes on top of that, and then you set in the door, and then you 4-inch flash tape 1 2 3 sides. So essentially we're going to take care of all of that. It's loud as soon as you get going with Tyvek. It's crinkly and loud, and I didn't want it flapping all around while I was talking here. Roo! Hark the noise. And I had planned to try and save the corners from the arch top and stuff, but it just turned into a nightmare here because we didn't actually have sheathing, and I couldn't trust the tar paper that's in there. So we'll come back and, you know, add all the way around on the corners. I have plenty of that shake too. We kept all the pieces that came out of the major opening. They're stacked in the garage, but, you know, overall, once again, I'll pump this full of great stuff past, and I guess that's been drawn down too far. These kind of hang out in space, the ends of this sheathing here, because of, well, because, and I'll just pump that full of great stuff, pest control, and do what we can to be satisfied with what we've done, and the transition from with what we've done to what was here. Be satisfied with that transition as well. I'm gonna have to sneak in behind the shake. I'm gonna have to be in probably either on top of the tar paper, whichever has an easier time of sliding in the Tyvek, either along the tar paper under the shake or under the tar paper on the boards. I gotta get underneath there, and then the transition will be taped with Tyvek tape, which is a different, you know, that's Tyvek brand tape there. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. We've all had enough of the door already, Chezzy. Put it in, let's see it, and then we can start making the deck, which is, after 15 episodes, what the series was supposed to be about. But as you can tell, to be out here at the basically the same height as the floor inside, the deck surface is here, the beam is right there, and if we had the beam in place, we would have never been able to work here and construct this, so this all had to happen first, as well as making sure that we had the same bit distance roundabout from the door to the face of the post. From the door to the face of the post. We were able to stay away from it here, so I don't have to work behind it. Over here is going to be kind of a pain in the butt to reside. We'll actually take the siding back a little farther just to be able to go back across after we get our membranes and stuff underneath there. All right, next time I promise the door is coming. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you. Look at that, a whole new world. This room is really something different now with these. Don and I, it's a couple weeks ago now, got these installed. We played around a fair bit to get these to work in this twisted old house, which is a cliche. Everybody thinks they know about a twisted old house, but this probably couldn't have been more difficult than this, as far as break my arm off, patting myself on the back situation. But it required Don and his son Don, to get it up and in here, and then Don and I came back, Senior and I came back, and both of us spent 4 hours here, so total 8 man hours getting this to work nicely. But boy, does it, you know, boy, does it work nice. Ooh. Yeah, love that. Feels great too, nice and heavy. And so I just temporarily got house wrap in here because I intend to tuck it behind the siding. And then of course our first beam is going to be right in front of the lower area here. So I wanted to go ahead and throw siding up and get it done. But I'm going to leave off of this because, let's face it, the series is called Big Deck Probs. Then we got to get to our big deck. And so this will be the last video without a start on the big deck. Here's our floor pan for the door. It's made out of white aluminum flashing. I will clean it up a little bit here. It's got some sealant still on there, but you end up just tacking floor pan into the jamb with one roofing nail on either end up high, and then it's a dry fit down onto the flashing tape, this stuff, the tinfoil tape jamb. But then it's got sealant on top of it, and the door sill sits in that sealant. So then I snuck this lower course of siding underneath. There is an underlayer to the first layer of cedar shake. So first there was, you know, one layer that was laid down with Tyvek showing, and then another layer where you cover all the seams, and then I painted it in here. Now it was, you know, these were all salvaged from the wall that was removed here, so the end of one shake to the next where the paint, you know, stopped and went around the corner. There's a witness here, you can see. I wasn't sure how obvious it would be. It's pretty obvious. And I also had planned on painting that floor pan, but I think that's just kind of shoddy. If it was easy enough to keep it, you know, white, and we'll leave it white. I will come back tomorrow and carefully sand those smooth, and some of these other little areas that I didn't realize, I'll caulk those with some OSI, you know, Max sealant, same stuff that the door is sitting in, and put our best foot forward there. But then we're going to leave off and set up our transit, throw a laser line in here where the top and bottom of our beam needs to be, translate that to all the posts, notch the posts, and then make, excuse me, our first couple beams. Exciting stuff. This is going to really tie the yard together when we're all done here, and I love to see the sort of cathedral kind of shapes that are happening. Not to be really, again, breaking my arm off, patting myself on the back, but a lot of thought went into this, and it's nice to see it finally coming in for a landing on the site. All right, I promise we're going to start that big deck next time. Thanks for watching. We'll see you.